Oh, howdy all. Grab yourself a beer, it's time for some part of Exile discussion. Today, I wanted to talk about the changes that GGG made to Headhunter in 3.14. Before making this video, I wanted to give the changes a fair go. So these changes were made, and I initially thought they'd probably wind up badly. But I thought, alright, I'm willing to let GGG prove me wrong on this. So, we've had a league now. It's been sort of 10 weeks or so since these changes were made, and now I have certainly not changed my initial opinion. Let's go to what the changes were, but firstly, a quick recap on what the item itself does. Headhunter is a particularly overpowered belt, and it has the most important mod on it is when you kill a rare monster, you gain its modifiers for 20 seconds. So what this does in practice is it lets you pick up really overpowered monster mods like the Haste Aura, which is far more powerful than the player skill Vile Haste. It lasts for 20 seconds when you take it, and it gives you 50% increased action speed and move speed. Absolutely crazy. And that's just one of the mods that you can get. There's a lot of other ones as well. Soul Eater, which is designed to turn an individual monster into a bit of an unkillable tyrant. But when you're the one that's waltzing through the map killing everything, you can stack up 200 copies of its buff and wind up with 200% increased attack speed and cast speed. I think it's 1% for 1%. Whatever it is, it's incredibly increased attack speed and cast speed. And you can just build up ridiculous speed that way. Headhunter will give you a lot of extra energy shield, a lot of extra life, all sorts of things like that. Ultimately, it turns your character into an absolute wrecking ball once you kill 3 or 4 rare monsters that then snowballs through the whole map and usually gets to the map boss with enough time left on those buffs to wipe out the map boss before these buffs start falling off. So that's what a Headhunter does, but what's changed about it? The item itself has had no changes to its stats for a very long time. The acquisition methods, though, have changed. So firstly, most Headhunters in previous leagues came from divination cards. There are 5 divination cards that always give a Headhunter in some form, and then there's a number that have a chance of giving a Headhunter. The 3, though, that matter the most are the Doctor, the Nurse, and the Patient. The Doctor is a set of 8 for 1 Headhunter, the Nurse is a set of 8 for 1 Doctor, and the Patient is a set of 8 for 1 Nurse. So as you can see, a Patient is 1/512th of a Headhunter. These divination cards appear to have been made much rarer. There's no statistically significant studies that have been done on this, but it's my gut feeling that they're 2.5 to 3 times as rare as they were a league ago. I could be wrong, they could be 5 times rarer. We don't know. But whatever the case, the number of maps that you need to do in order to self-farm a Headhunter has gone from a couple of thousand last league to many thousands this league. It's gone from in reach for the obsessed to out of reach even for the obsessed. You just can't do 5,000 plus maps in a league unless you have some really unhealthy gaming habits. So essentially the idea of self-farming all of the divination cards to turn in for a Headhunter is gone now. And essentially you need to either get lucky or to use trade in order to get one. So Headhunter can drop anywhere in the game and is speculated by many to be mirror rarity from monsters. I actually speculate it's considerably rarer than a mirror, although I'm not sure of this. This is a pretty minor effect on the number of Headhunters that are available in the league. I did a little bit of an analysis. I looked at all of the Headhunters that are listed for trade in the Ultimatum League, including by offline characters, and had a look at their item level. If they're item level 80, it's a pretty reasonable guess that they came from a divination card, just due to the way that divination cards that grant uniques work. Their item level, if it's not otherwise specified, is the maximum of your character level and 80. And 73% of the Headhunters that were available in trade were item level exactly 80. So with that in mind, I speculate that only 27% of the Headhunters in circulation have come from direct drops, and the other 73% have come from divination cards. So the divination card drop rates have been nerfed, but they're still the preeminent way that the item is being sourced. Direct drops of Headhunter are so staggeringly rare that in Zizaran's recent Class Gauntlet event, which had 45,000 players, of which something like 15,000 got to maps, there were exactly 0 Headhunters equipped at the end of that event on high-level characters. So that should give you a bit of a sense. Like, it's not like people were running fast during that event. It was a hardcore solo self-found environment with lots of hard mods. It wasn't really a traditional clear speed meta, but you would expect that there would be a number of Headhunters dropping in there. Even if they ended up being equipped by characters that then promptly died, those characters would probably stay on the ladder and so still be seen afterwards. Ultimately, though, there were none there, and that gives you a bit of a sense as to just how rare the direct drops are. Additionally, you could source a Headhunter by tricking a map into thinking that it was back in the Nemesis League. You could do that by either using an infused Nemesis Harvest Craft or by using Nemesis from Zana's map mods pool when it's available. And then you could use Ancient Orbs or Chance Orbs and have a Headhunter drop that way. Forge a Headhunter that way. I had a look at Ancient Orb acquisition, and the vast majority of people that do attempt to Ancient Orb a Headhunter use an item level 40-ish belt. So I had a look for the Headhunters in Trade League that are close to item level 40, and there were almost none of them. And so I concluded from this that Ancient Orbs are almost not a source of Headhunters anymore. Then also looked at Chance Orbs. A knowledgeable player who is scour chancing leather belts in order to try and get a Headhunter is going to use influence belts, and there were only 3 influenced Headhunters available in trade. That was just 1.2% of the Headhunters that were available at the time, and so I concluded that Chance Orbs are almost a non-factor as well. So basically, the majority of Headhunters are coming from divination cards. The secondary pool is direct drops, and then that's basically it. In terms of the overall rarity of the item, the number of Headhunters amongst the top 15,000 players in the solo self-found environments has been an interesting one to look at. So in Ritual League, by week 10, which is about where we are now, there were 697 players in the top 15,000 by XP that were wearing a Headhunter. We're currently in about week 10 of Ultimatum, and the number of players wearing a Headhunter in the top 15,000 is 86. So that should give you a bit of a sense that there is an enormous reduction in the number of Headhunters going around in solo self-found. Again, this means that people are giving up on self-farming it, and then some people are just getting lucky and having one drop. So, these same changes applied to a lot of items as well, but those actually became more accessible. So for instance, Badge of the Brotherhood was very, 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 very rare in previous leagues and could often be as expensive as a Headhunter. In this league, Badge of the Brotherhood is just a couple exalts, and that's because it was decoupled from the Blight content, and that's just made it much more common. It's now a drop anywhere unique. Any monster can drop it, and sometimes that happens a meaningful amount of the time. So, let's talk quickly about what I think GGG's intention with these changes was, and then we'll assess how well it met those goals. I've identified 3 goals that I think GGG had in mind with this change. So the first one was to increase the number of oh my god moments that happens during gameplay. By adding pure Headhunter drops. So, it's like someone has a Headhunter or a Mero drop while they're mapping, and then there's just this sudden shock where they're like, did I just see what I thought I saw? Then they go back and they loot it and they're like, oh wow. And if they're playing with something like Shadowplay, then they might just save a clip of that, post it up on Reddit or whatever, and you see a lot of people sort of being really excited to have, this once in a lifetime ridiculous drop occur for them. So I think that was one of their goals. The second goal that I think they had was to decrease the number of people who burn out and quit the league straight after farming Headhunter. This sort of almost happened to me the first time I farmed a Headhunter. It was back in the Incursion League. I got myself my 8 Doctor cards that were a bit more common than they are now, and I ended up, having Headhunter. It's the first time I'd ever had a 30 plus exalt item. I think it was only 30 exalts back then. And I was like so excited to use it for a little while. And then I started running a few maps and realizing, it's actually sort of sucking the fun out of the game because I'm just too powerful for the content that's available for me. And at that point, I realized that getting Headhunter every league was not for me. And I think this is probably a pretty common experience. I think there's a lot of people that get Headhunter and then that's pretty close to the end of the league for them. They might run another couple of hundred maps with it and then eventually realize, there's just not that much left to do that's fun, or everything that's fun is too much effort to set up. And so I think that GGG may have been trying to say, we are removing Headhunter from the pool of uniques that you can target farm without being completely obsessed with the game. And, the people that have gone for it in the past that often burn out, they're not going to try for it anymore. I think that may have been their opinion, their intent, and I'll talk about what I think on being the results later. The third thing that I think they were trying to do was decrease or at least not increase the effect that Headhunter has in distorting a trade league economy. And so let's measure these changes against those metrics. Firstly, I think for most players, having a doctor card drop is an oh my god moment. And doctor drops in 3.13 were so much more common than Headhunter drops in 3.14. In fact, doctor drops remain more common in 3.13 than they were in 3.14 than Headhunter drops are as well. So I think there's been a net reduction in oh my god moments for most players. There are players like myself for whom a doctor drop is not some oh my god moment. It's exciting. It's probably the best thing that's going to happen to you in that play session, but it's not some super memorable drop the way that it is if you're a 24 challenge player and you get a doctor drop. But I think that we've had a net reduction in the number of these oh my god moments that have happened because of these changes. And so I'm going to assess the changes as a failure on this metric. Secondly, the topic of burnout. Here, I didn't burn out on this league, and a big part of this was realizing early on, this is not going to be a league where farming Headhunter is going to be a fun experience. Therefore, I am not farming Headhunter this league. I realized that in week 1 of the league. And as a result, I think I was pretty much immune to burnout. But looking around, I've seen a number of PoE content creators that have been underwhelmed by this league. And I think a big part of that is that a lot of them feel obligated to chase Headhunter every single league, perhaps because their viewers on stream expect them to have it. And so for this reason, there seems to have been more burnout than usual this league. I can't say that for absolute certainty. GGG would probably have much more accurate data than I do, but I'm going to call this a failure on that metric. In the absence of data that absolutely proves that it's been a failure. I do think that player burnout's been higher than normal, and I think that a significant factor in that has been the fact that going for Headhunter has gone from being a somewhat enjoyable experience to a miserable one because it's just too much longer now. Third, let's talk about the impact of Headhunter on trade leagues. So, it's fundamentally the case that Headhunter breaks risk and reward balance in Path of Exile. Without Headhunter, an encounter that has 30 regular monsters and 3 rares is made objectively harder by adding 6 more rares to that encounter. Because you've added those 6 more rares, the encounter is more difficult, and therefore it awards more XP and more loot. Now imagine though that you have Headhunter. This reverses the situation. The encounter with 30 normal monsters and 3 rares is actually objectively harder than the one that has 30 normal and 9 rares. And so this creates this really bizarre situation where you've got an objectively easier encounter is also the one that awards more XP and more loot. So you have a bunch of monsters in a map, and a large number of them, basically every rare monster in the map except the super tankiest and super rippiest ones. Every single one of those monsters makes the map easier than it would be if they weren't there. And yet those monsters drop, I think rare monsters drop, 14 times the loot of a normal monster, and something like 5 times the XP of a normal monster. So these monsters end up being this sort of negative challenge impact on the map. Likewise, this is especially the case when you talk about mechanics like Beyond. When you have a Headhunter, Beyond makes maps easier, not harder, and yet it also makes them much more lucrative than they otherwise would be. And so because of this, having a Headhunter equipped becomes a prerequisite for efficiently running some content in trade leagues. Most importantly, this is the Legion 5-way encounter. So essentially, Headhunter is a barrier for entry into this content, and that barrier for entry got higher. What happens when a barrier for entry into content gets higher? Well, the trade market responds by the content that's gated by Headhunter dropping in price and also becoming more lucrative to run. That's been the case in this league. I think that the Maraketh emblems and the Templar emblems have become cheaper than they otherwise would have been because there are fewer players with Headhunters buying them up. Additionally, some of the things that drop from the 5-way Legion fights have become more valuable, like become more valuable than they otherwise would have been, because those do disgorge a lot of loot. And so this ends up meaning that I think that the wealth concentration effect of Headhunter may actually have been worse in this league than in 3.13, say. And that's because every Headhunter is more impactful on the overall trade league economy. Every individual Headhunter has more of an impact in this league than it would have had in previous leagues. There's a number of, sort of 10 Exalt and up an hour strategies that you can use if you've got a Headhunter. Things like farming 5-way legions whilst bringing along paying people. So people who pay for a spot in the 5-way encounter because all they want is the XP. And you basically blitz the zone, you split the loot, but you can end up making a staggering amount of currency doing this. There's a lot of people that make like upwards of 8-10 Exalts an hour doing this, just farming those 5-way encounters over and over again, selling slots in them all the time. And that's just become more lucrative this league now that the barrier for entry to that content is higher than it used to be. So overall, I'm going to call the effect on the trade league economy a failure as well. Now I've got a couple of things that are a bit more speculative. So this is an anecdote. I cannot back this up with evidence, but it has been my experience in the Ultimatum League that there have been more bad faith actors in trade. So what I mean when I talk about bad faith actors, I'm talking the people who post an item for miles below fair price just in order to try and trick you into undercutting them, at which point they'll buy your item and then have their alt then go and resell it at its fair market value. Things like this. Basically people whose goal in trade is to be a trade shark, to make a deal that the other party wouldn't agree to if they were knowledgeable about the, if they had perfect knowledge about the game economy. So, like I can often say, let's say that Chevron's Wrappings is trading for 1.2 Exalts at a given time in a league. I may happily buy one for 1.4 Exalts because I just want it right now. That's not an example of a trade shark. A trade shark is someone who tries to trick someone into handing over a Chevron's Wrappings for, 0.3 Exalts or whatever. I think that because the single most profitable thing you can do in Path of Exile is trade shark. That's been the case for a long time. And I think that we have seen a situation in this league where trade sharking has increased, and the reason for that is that players start farming a Headhunter. They maybe get 3/8 of the way there, and then they go, you know what? Maybe they start doing it in Heist. That's their favorite content in the game. They start running Heist. They're like, oh yeah, I'm getting closer and closer to my Headhunter. Oh, you know what? I'm just sick of this. I can't take this anymore. I can't put up with hearing Gianna's voice. I want a shortcut. What's the best shortcut? It's to scam someone. It's to trade shark in some way, and to, instead of relying upon my play and my good luck, try and take advantage of someone else's good luck. And so that's my speculation. I could be wrong here, but I think that trade sharking has increased, and I think a big part of that is the fact that the demand for Headhunters isn't met. There's a lot of people who are desperate to get their hands on this item, perhaps have never had it before, and so they're turning to trade sharking because it is simply the most lucrative thing you can do. So I think that because in previous leagues you could farm a Headhunter yourself while having fun, in 3.14 I don't think you can. And that's the reason that I speculate trade sharking's gotten worse. I could be wrong. That's just my thoughts there. So, what's my overall opinion on the state of Headhunter as an item in general and what I think should happen in the future? Firstly, I want to compare Headhunter as a chase item to the Mirror of Calandra, because they both have a pretty similar sort of goal. Obviously, Mirrors trade for more than a Headhunter in almost every league, but Headhunter is a loot acquisition multiplier. Headhunter may be the difference between doing 24 maps an hour and doing 40, whereas a mirror, let's say that you use it on a weapon, let's say that you get an excellent weapon, you get the best one on the server for your build, and it's one that everyone agrees is a good choice of item to mirror. Most people do tend to mirror a weapon first. So mirroring a weapon will often be the case between, say, killing Uber Elder, each phase of Uber Elder. Maybe you kill him in 6 seconds instead of 11 each time. This is not a big loot or XP acquisition multiplier, and in general mapping, it might mean that you can do 26 maps an hour instead of 24, whereas Headhunter is going to push you from 24 up to 40, because it's increasing your move speed, it's increasing your cast speed, it's increasing all of these stats that matter when you are, when you're trying to clear maps faster. So Headhunter is more dangerous to have running around in the economy than Mirrors of Kalandra are. Ultimately, I think that because Headhunter breaks a risk reward in Path of Exile on a fundamental level, it's my opinion that the current full power version of the item should not continue to exist in temporary leagues. Let it go to standard. Let the item continue in standard alongside past design mistakes, like the 1000 hit point Calm's Heart at the lesser end of design mistake, or the double legacy Vintar's Vessel at the top end of absolutely crazy design mistakes that rot in standard now. Let the people that like using these items have their fun in standard, where they can't dominate the most, the trade league economy of the most popular way to play the game, which is trade-enabled softcore leagues. Let it be in standard alongside those other crazy items of the past, and let that be where it goes to from here. I think the core concept of the item is fine, but granting all the mods on a rare item, on a rare monster for 20 seconds is too much at today's game pace. It was fine in the Nemesis League when it was introduced. In fact, it wasn't even a chase item at the time, because you might kill 3 rare monsters in that 20-second period. But now that you're killing 15, 20 regularly, the item has just fundamentally broken. It's jumped the shark in power. I think it would be really interesting to see a league tested where Headhunter's effect lasts 12 seconds and this duration cannot be extended. I think this would still remain the most powerful item in the game, but it would not be the ridiculous loot acquisition multiplier that it is now. But that said, if GGG aren't willing to nerf the item, then I think they should make it more common again. It's paradoxical how having it be rarer ends up making it have more of an impact on the trade economy, but I certainly believe it does. And I think that if they're not willing to nerf it, then they should just revert the rarity changes, accept that 30,000 or more of this item are going to exist in the temporary leagues, and reduce rare monster proliferation in league content correspondingly. So that's probably a bit of an odd-seeming position in the end, that I think Headhunter should be nerfed, but failing that nerf, it should be made more common than it is right now. But that's all my rationale for it. If you've got comments or questions, definitely fire away below. I have been doing a series looking at popular and powerful endgame unique items, and I will put links on the left-hand side of the screen. Feels so weird to say left-hand side of the screen and then point to my right, but that's just the way that cameras work. On the left-hand side of the screen, there'll be a link to some of that. And otherwise, I hope your Val Orbs have interesting results, and I will see you when we get underway with 3.15 spoiler season, which should be very, very soon.